We are anonymous. We are not a party. We are not a campaign. We are not your favorite politician's damage control team. We are the voice that shows up when power hides behind spectacle, when public money disappears, and when corruption gets dressed up as politics. Anonymous reveals, Anonymous exposes California's explosive fraud allegations as DOJ closes in. Move over, Nick Shirley. According to the original segment, there's a new so-called fraud czar, J.D. Vance. The president announced that Vice President J.D. Vance was now in charge of fraud in the United States, that they would call him the fraud czar, and that his focus would be everywhere, but especially blue states, where, in that telling, crooked Democrat politicians had supposedly enjoyed a free-for-all with taxpayer money. The segment says American taxpayers have been ripped off for too long, that the fraud in blue states is supposedly so massive, J.D. Vance could balance the national budget just by targeting it, and that in California, opening a hospice had become an easy hustle, and the scheme described there is blunt. It had allegedly been going on for years, and the setup, we are told, worked in almost the same way every time. People would get a hospice license from the state of California because you cannot bill Medicare for hospice without a state license. But the accusation is that those licenses were being issued with little or no checking and no real vetting. In one example from the original story, a couple with a criminal record allegedly could not get the license themselves, so they put it under their daughter's name, kept operating the hospice through her name anyway, billed Medicare for more than $4 million, and, according to the speaker, nothing happened until they were finally arrested. Then comes the sarcasm. Maybe everyone should go get a license because everybody seems to be cashing in, except now the FBI is starting to crack down. Then the picture shifts to early morning in Southern California. FBI SWAT teams making simultaneous arrests of hospice owners accused of booking millions from federal taxpayers. The original transcript includes the shouted questions. Do you have anything to say about those charges? And have you got anything to say about these accusations? It says investigators had been working the case for 4 years. It describes a husband and wife, a doctor and a nurse, operating out of St. Francis Palliative Care in a high-rise office, accused in a criminal complaint of enrolling hundreds of patients who did not qualify for hospice while billing the federal government as though they did. The operation, the segment says, was called Operation Never Say Die, targeting phantom hospice centers, and it claims that doctors, nurses, and psychologists were arrested after allegedly pocketing $60 million under Gavin Newsom's watch. And the way they allegedly got caught, the supposedly terminally ill patients were not dying. The transcript then names Lolita Menard, described as a 65-year-old woman in Anaheim who ran Topena Hospice Care. It says she billed Medicare for more than $9.1 million over a 5-year period for the care of supposedly terminally ill patients. And then comes the statistic that made the segment stop in its tracks. This company allegedly had a death discharge rate of 85% survival, meaning, as the speaker puts it, hospice is usually where people go to die, and you are not supposed to see an 85% survival rate coming out of a hospice facility. The segment says that is 5 times the national average of 17%. The point is not subtle. If the patients keep living, the paperwork starts screaming, and it gets worse in the original account. It says everyone is dying to open a hospice center, but the fraudsters cannot stop because they are addicted to the money. Then it names Nita Palma, 76 years old, described as a 3-time convicted healthcare fraudster, already in federal prison, yet now charged again because she allegedly carried out a new hospice fraud scheme while still behind bars. That is the part meant to make your jaw drop. According to the transcript, the fraud had become so bold that prison itself was no longer an obstacle. Then the story widens beyond hospice. The original script says maybe the fraud Czar should also look at the homeless industrial complex, because in one example, the son of San Francisco's top homeless official allegedly got paid $10,000 for 5 slides on top of $140,000 for research services. The line in the transcript is openly mocking. Not a bad gig. Call me if you need more research. It also notes he had not been charged, but prosecutors allegedly said the payments seemed unfair. Then comes the larger accusation. California has become a cash register for scammers. And from there, the transcript invokes Chris Rufo's claim that during COVID, more people applied for unemployment in California than there were adults living there. It says, officials admitted to paying almost $20 billion in fraudulent claims, that you did not even need to be alive to claim unemployment, that prisoners and even dead people got approved, and that rappers got in on it too, and bragged in their songs. The transcript then references Nuke Bizzle, and says after the song dropped, he was charged with fraud and pleaded guilty to stealing more than $700,000, turning bars into behind bars. That part, at least, lines up with public DOJ records showing Fontrell Antonio Baines, known as Nuke Bizzle, pleaded guilty and was later sentenced in a COVID unemployment fraud case, with restitution ordered at $784,760, and California's own Employment Development Department has publicly said that by October 2021, about $20 billion in benefits were likely fraudulent. Then the argument hardens. The transcript says this is not just a fraud problem, it is a California problem, because the federal government is the purse. All the money comes from Washington, and, in that speaker's view, California failed to vet,
Let's just listen to your heart for a moment.
And did not care because it was not state money being burned. That is where the original language becomes theatrical. California is called the Kingdom of Fraud, and Gavin Newsom is described as reigning over it, with hundreds of billions of dollars in fraud. Then comes the interview setup with Chris Rufo, introduced as a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. The host says that if hospice, Medicaid, Medicare, daycares, and learning centers look this bad, then who knows what the voter rolls look like. Rufo's quoted claim in the transcript is enormous. He says he and reporters spent months reviewing hundreds of documents and interviewing dozens of sources across California, and that their best estimate, along with experts at HHS and elsewhere, was that California under Gavin Newsom had lost between $180 billion and $280 billion to fraud. He says that included Romanian scammers, neo-Nazi prison gangs, and other foreign criminal enterprises ripping off taxpayers in California and across the country. He then calls it the single largest systematic fraud case in American history, really in world history, and says it was all happening under Newsom. Those are dramatic claims from the original source, and they should be understood as claims from that source, not courtroom findings that have all been proven in full. The transcript then says Newsom did not want to take accountability, that he was going back and forth with U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley on X through his press office, saying it was not his fault, and that this was supposed to fall under federal jurisdiction. The host mocks him, saying maybe he is too busy podcasting to look inside his own state. Rufo responds that Newsom has a Teflon quality, like other politicians, but that he will not outrun this because the scale is too enormous. Then he goes further. He says the dirty secret is that fraud in California actually benefits Newsom because it brings federal dollars into the state and helps union power brokers harvest health care jobs and expenditures into their coffers and ultimately campaign funds. He calls it a form of legalized corruption that Newsom cannot escape, and says more stories are coming, week after week, and that Newsom cannot hide from the fraud he is overseeing. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. We are not here to entertain power, and we are not here to flatter the men who abuse it. We are here to expose it,